earlier, but see, we get everybody here. We can spend a minute introducing each other and what's your name and where you're calling from. So we don't have an idea who are our audience for the call today. Who would like to start?
I'll start. This is John Hoover, and I'm calling in from Moscow, Idaho.
Welcome, John. Great seeing you.
Yes. I'm closer to Damien now here in the Pacific time zone, too.
Yeah. Yes. So because I don't get to see, Lily and I were not going to see you. We see only 3 or 4 people because we have the sharing screen. Just say your name and don't wait for us to call you.
Hey, this is Jeff Nally. I'm here in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's good to see everybody. Hello, Ellery. Hello, Lily.
Hi, everybody. I'm Yari Quinteros. I am calling from the Washington, D.C. area.
Hello, my name is Teresa Estremadoro, and I am calling from New Jersey, Baskin Ridge.
Hello, everybody. I'm Gilda from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
Hola.
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 Buenas tardes.
Hey everybody, it's Victor Harder. Victor Harder calling from Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Yay, Canada!
Yeah.
Yay, you guys too.
Hey everyone, Ted Middleburg, Austin, Texas. Hi.
Hi Damien, Peter. This is Ram Ramanathan. I'm currently in Chicago, but generally I'm in Bangalore.
Sorry, could you just say your name again?
Ram Ramanathan.
Great, thank you. And where are you from normally when you're not in Chicago?
Bangalore in India.
Ah, Bangalore. Great.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dulce. I speak from Portugal, but I live in Brazil.
Welcome. Everybody have a chance to introduce.
Hi,
yourself?
everyone. Hi, everyone. I don't have audio. I don't have video today. This is Sherry Boone. I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Welcome.
Hi, good morning. My name is Elena Espinal. I was born in Argentina. I live in Mexico.
Great, Elena. Great having you here.
How are you, Damian?
Great to hear your voice.
Hello, everyone. This is Mary Jo Asmus, and I'm in Michigan.
Great. Welcome, Mary Jo.
And this is Catherine Holt calling in from California.
So today you are in San Francisco?
Yes, Foster City, yep.
Yeah. Great.
Great. Nice part of the world.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason. I'm in Los Angeles, California.
My neighbor.
This is Terry Hildebrand from Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, I need you to quit doing that, son. That breaks the transmission.
Great.
Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't see how to do it right now. Looking. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Good morning, Michelle Bostock from Golden, British Columbia.
Welcome, Michelle. Anybody else got here at the last minute?
Good afternoon. It's Michael Cullen calling from Montreal, Canada.
Another Canadian. Yay, lots of Canadians today.
Hey,
Michelle, Victor, Michael, nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
Bienvenue.
Bienvenue. Oui.
Yeah.
Well, I think everybody has the chance to introduce you, say where you're calling from. Anybody?
Colleen Bastion from Delray Beach, Florida.
Welcome.
Hey, Colleen.
Okay, well, it
I think we got a couple. We got a couple more. I think Angela and Larissa.
You want to introduce yourself?
Hello, this is Fernanda from Argentina. Hello, everybody.
Argentina, look at that.
Great,
Larissa or Angela, do you want to check in?
Hi, this is Angela. I'm calling in from New York.
Larissa posted she's having trouble with her headset, so she may say hello later.
Okay, and somebody's on Team Power 2. Who would that be?
That's Elena.
Oh, okay,
That's Elena, that's Elena from Mexico. So we're going to ask everyone to please mute yourself so we don't hear the background. And I think that, Peter, as you can see, this is a network of coaching supervisors, students, people who are interested in coaching supervision from all Americas, Canada, North America, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. I don't know. I hope I'm not missing any country. Don't kill me. Don't hate me for that if I do. But we have here from all of these countries from America, and we're very happy to have this opportunity to network and people get to know each other and support each other for the work that they are doing. So with that, Lily, I don't know if you want to introduce to Peter anything you want to say before we start.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to introduce Peter. Professor Peter Hawkins. I think he's calling in from Bath. Is that correct, Peter? Yes.
Yep.
He's a leading
autumnal misty Bath.
Right. Actually, the Bath Castle. Barrow Castle.
In Barrow Castle, indeed.
He lives on 37 acres of land with a lot of animals and lots of organic farming and beautiful rolling hills. I was lucky enough to visit in May when I was doing a walkabout in Europe. He has 3 children and 5 grandchildren, so very much a huge part of their lives out there. He's a leading global consultant. He's a writer, research, and leadership development. I'm sure most of you, everyone here has heard about him or know of his work. We study his 7-eyed model in coaching supervision. He's just completed a major research project on tomorrow's leadership and the necessary revolution in today's leadership development. I love that name, and I'm sure he's going to share some of those key findings. He's also a keynote speaker, an author, and an international thought leader. So I'm not going to spend too much time. Let's welcome Peter. And Peter, just to let you know, you're a little dark. I think your light is on the back of you, so hard to see your lovely face. Over to you.
So I don't know how I can change the lighting, but I think normally I'm facing the window, but it's just getting dark here. So I'm backlit. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be with you all. We've got a lovely mixture of people from some of my favorite cities and places I'm yet to visit. But just to mention that I will be doing a day up in Victoria Island just before the Coaching Supervision Conference next April as a deep dive into the 7-eyed model. Before that, I shall be in New York in January, Los Angeles beginning of April, then Santa Barbara, then San Francisco, and then up to Vancouver. So I'm looking forward, hopefully, to meeting some of you in those various places. So today, I'm just going to give a very quick kind of overview of how I see some of the issues around coaching supervision. Some of you may know I've been involved writing about supervision since the early 1980s. But particularly coaching supervision came very alive in just after 2000. When I was approached by a number of people who said, look, we've got a challenge. And I said, great, I love challenges. What's your challenge? They said, look, we believe all coaches need to be supervised by trained coaching supervisors. And I said, yeah, I agree, that's a great idea. So I said, what's the problem? They said, there aren't any. So since around 2003, I've been running training programs for senior coaches and how they supervise other coaches. And we just had a program here last week with one of your colleagues, Lily from California. Catherine was here. We had people from about 7 different countries. So, but let me just start by asking you some questions. I don't think we've got a poll system on here, but you can all just wave at me and I can see some of your pictures. How many of you actually believe it's important that coaches, mentors, and consultants have regular ongoing supervision? Yeah?
Yes.
So let me ask you the next one. How many of you receive regular ongoing supervision? Not just when you've got problems. Most of you. The third question is, how many of you receive supervision that consistently transforms your practice? I think somebody's not muted their microphone. I'm getting lots of kind of flowing water. That's better. Great. So how many of you receive supervision that consistently transforms you, your practice, and develops both you and your craft? Because that's where I think we're going to have to really move to, is that third one. When I first did the research in 2006 and did lots of keynotes around coaching supervision, what was interesting is that across Europe, about 84% of people said yes to the first. When we got to the second question, it dropped to about 42. And when we got to the third question, it dropped to about 10. So one of the things we've been battling with is how come so many people say, yeah, it's really important for people to have supervision, but so few coaches still do it. So the next question I'm going to ask you is, it'd be great if you could write down, just in a couple of minutes, who does coaching supervision serve? And write down as few or as many answers as you can do in about 3 minutes. So if you've got a piece of paper in front of you, write down, who would you say that coaching supervision serves? And interestingly, I did a keynote at one of the big global ICF conferences, their scaffolding conference, when it came to London. And because I know that coaching supervision, this was about 3 years ago, was such a hot political issue with the ICF, particularly in North America, I thought, let's start not from why is supervision a good idea, but let's look at who are our stakeholders. So what would be great is if you could, do we have a chat box? Let's see, how do I get the chat box open?
Yes, if you go to the bottom and hover your screen, you'll see chat.
Now, how do I get to?
Keep going down, 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 down.
Let's how do I go down? I follow my screen. Because I've got the slides on, I'm not sure how I do that.
Yep, if you hover below your slides, you'll see a black line, and on it there's a different functions, and you'll see chat.
I'm not getting that black line, so let's just see if I can...
You have to unshare your screen first.
Okay. So, great. Now I've got it. So let's look at participants, and the chat box is chat. Great. So what would be good is just if some of you could put some of the people you think in that chat box. Great, some of you already have. The client, the supervisor, the coach, stakeholders, developers, people and professionals, great. The community and the industry, the world, fantastic. So let me go back to share my screen and put up, right, so why am I not, here we go, great. So if I can move that down to minimize that. So this is my kind of list. The obvious ones that people come up with, the supervisee's current individual team clients. Then we go on to the organizations those clients work for. Then we look at, well, how is it serving the stakeholders of that organization, the customers, the investors, the employees, suppliers, communities, the environment. And then the ones that didn't come up on a lot of people's lists are, what about the organization that the coach works for? if they're part of an agency. Then I think there is two others which are really important. One is, how does supervision also serve the future clients? I.e., it's not just looking at yesterday's problems, but how are we growing the capacity of the coach to be able to reach a wider breadth of clients and at more depth? So how are we growing the coach's capacity? Then I think there's another area, which is, how is it serving the profession? It's very easy for coaching supervision to become a place where kind of senior coaches enculture new coaches in how to be part of the profession. But coaching should also be the learning lungs of the profession, a place where by attending to what's happening at the current leading edge, we are as a profession learning and growing all the time and adapting. So I think it's a very interesting question for us as coaching supervisors, is how do we harvest the professional learning and how do we share that? And then of course it should also be a place where the supervisor is constantly learning. Because if we're not learning, then my guess is the amount that the supervisee and the profession are learning is also going down. Then just to take you back, this is what I was saying just now. In 2006, we did a major bit of research across not only coaches, but also organizations that provided coaching for their employees. And these are the figures I referred to. Many people thought that supervision was important for coaches, but it was far less practiced. And even those who were having regular, ongoing supervision, most had started in the last 2 years. So we're dealing with something that's arrived quite late on the scene, given that not only myself, but perhaps one or two other people on the line, have been coaching since the late 1970s or 1980s. Supervision has arrived quite late on the picture. And as you'll see at the bottom, even the writing about it started quite late. Although in the last 15 years, and I know that Damien, you've just got your book coming out when in Spanish?
At the end of the year. I hope the book is already being worked on, so the publisher will finish it at the end of the year, by November.
Great. So something you can look forward to is Damien's great book. Now, I've read it, albeit not in Spanish, but in Google translation. But a lot of very useful stuff. And what we're also seeing is a number of my books have gone into Japanese, Chinese. We're seeing an enormous spread of literature and books by other people. People like Tatiana Bakarova, done a good edited collection, and Jonathan Passmore. So we see the literature really expand. And other research that's come out more recently, but what I'm going to talk about is that in 2014 we updated our 2006 research. This was some research I did with Eve Turner, mainly to look at the whole area of how we do multi-stakeholder contracting around coaching. How do we contract not just with the individual, but with their team, their organization, their stakeholders? And as part of that, we updated, as you'll see in red, the research on supervision. And what we found is that there's been an enormous shift globally in the number of coaches who reported having supervision. You'll see that in the UK, it's gone up from somewhere in the mid-40s to 92%. But what you'll notice is that in the Americas, although we only had a small number of people fill it in from Latin America, the percentage was quite high. In America, where 42 people filled it in, the percentage was lagging behind the other countries. And I think that's partly for social, partly because I think there's been a long debate in America about the dangers if we introduce coaching supervision of people being having to go through licensing the way psychotherapists do or counselors. Now I'm getting somebody else's, I'm not sure if somebody's asking a question or I'm just getting their background noise. Ah, it's gone again. But what was also encouraging was not only to see that globally there'd been a big increase in the number of people saying they were having coaching supervision, but of the 500 people who took part, when asked the top 2 reasons why they were motivated around supervision, the highest were kind of intrinsic motivations, that it was part of their personal commitment to good practice, and because they saw it as an essential part of their continuing personal and professional development. So this was, encouraging signs that things are beginning to move. When we asked about, what's the blockages, and we asked people why they didn't have supervision. In 2006, a lot of the answers were, well, there aren't good coach supervisors around. That was still there, but had diminished greatly. There's still a lot of resistance to the word. Somebody at the ICF conference that I spoke at said, only people who work in factories have a supervisor. I did try and point out to her, well, this is supervision now is a fairly accepted practice among doctors, among nurses, social workers, psychotherapists, counselors. Many of the people professions kind of recognize supervision and clinical supervision as a critical aspect of their work with people. But I do recognize that as a word, it's problematic. And in 2 ways. The first, that sense that kind of the supervisor is somebody who's senior to you, rather than supervision as a collaborative enterprise, but also that association that other associations people have with it. So in 2006, when there was the issues about the word, I said, all right, I'll offer a crate of champagne for people who come up with a better name. I still have the crate of champagne. So I'm still open to offers, but people came up with things like it should be called coach mentoring. You see, I think that's one aspect of it. Other people said, I think it should be called coaching the coach. Well, that's one aspect of it, but neither of those, both of those are reducing supervision just to one part of what I think is the overall process. And I think, there's a lot that we can learn from supervision of psychologists, of psychiatrists, of nurses, and rather than feel that we're special, to say, well, yes, we're different, but what can we learn from them and what can they learn from us? So in the end, we thought, well, actually, the word supervision is the one we need to stick with. The one I don't think I need it, I think is an interesting one. I think that one of the things that we confronted at the ICF conference is that the coaches who think, well, once I got my certificate, that's it, I'm trained for life. And one of the things we know from the research is that experience in years of practice doesn't necessarily make you better. It can actually make you more complacent and more becoming rigid in your approach and the ways of operating. So one of the phrases we came up with was that coaching supervision is not just for Christmas, it's for life. I'll skip that one and just do a quick run through some of the key aspects. So that the definition that we work with around supervision is it's a structured formal process for coaches who, with the help of a coaching supervisor, attend to improving the quality of their coaching, grow their coaching capacity, and support themselves and their practice. And that supervision should also be a source of organizational learning and, as I indicated earlier, professional learning. So one of the things about that is to notice that I don't believe that supervision is done by the supervisor. And by the way, I don't believe coaching is done by the coach. I believe that that both supervision and coaching are collaborative practices, whereas rather than treating our supervisee as our client and asking them what they want from supervision, I always start by asking, what is the work that your world is requiring us to do together? Yeah? Because I believe that the collaborative process is not just me as supervisor and them as supervisee, but is also co-created, the work is co-created by all those stakeholders that supervision is there to serve.
Excuse me, Peter, can you repeat it, the question?
So rather than asking at the beginning of supervision, what do you want from supervision? I now ask, what is the work that your ecosystem, your stakeholder world needs us to work on together? And interestingly, I also end my supervision. I used to for years, 20 years, I'd have ended my supervision quite regularly by saying, what was helpful about this supervision and what could be even more helpful next time? It took me 20 years to wake up to the fact that by doing that, I was stepping back into supplier mode and seeing them as customer, and moving out of partnership mode where we've been doing the work together. So now I say, if your clients were in the room, if your agency boss was in the room, if your colleagues were in the room, what would they have valued about the work you and I have done together over the last hour? And what would their challenge be to us? So I bring the stakeholder's voice into the room at the start of the session and at the end of the session, because once I've got them in the room, we can work with them and keep their voice live in our work together. Does that make sense? Great. So I see supervision as always a triangulated practice, co-created between supervisee, supervisor, and the work. So I will also be very keen to bring in the, not just what they bring to supervision, but what they also don't bring to supervision. I supervised a PhD who did a whole survey on supervision, and what she found is that a large percentage of supervisees don't bring the issues they find most difficult or are most embarrassed about. So I will now regularly ask in supervision, so tell me about the clients you don't bring to supervision. Tell me about the client you would find most difficult to bring. Some of you may know that when I work with team coaching and organizational coaching, I often talk about how do we get the stakeholder's voice into the room. And when I'm working with organizations, I talk about the 13th fairy. And I say every organization has a 13th fairy. And this comes from the fairy story that some of you may know of Sleeping Beauty. When the 13th fairy was the one that was not invited to the christening. And she only became the bad fairy because she was not invited to the party. And the example I give of organizations, 13th fairy, the stakeholder they ignore at their peril is British Petroleum, who didn't realize that fishermen on the east coast of America in Florida were a critical stakeholder until it was too late. And you may know from the Gulf oil disaster that the fishermen on the east coast, whose livelihood was ruined by that disaster, nearly brought BP to their knees, because those those fishermen were also campaigning for people to boycott BP. They were campaigning to the government to stop it being in America. They were lobbying their senators. So be careful of the stakeholder you're not noticing. Yeah? And be careful as a supervisor that we're only attending to the clients they know are difficult rather than ones they don't know. So just to set, again, in supervision in context of, the first of those columns is from social work supervision, when they talk about Kadushin, who was from Canada, by the way, one of the first people to write about social work supervision. He talked about it having a managerial aspect and educative and supportive. And Bridget Proctor, who's from the UK, wrote in about counselling and psychotherapy supervision being normative, formative, and restorative. But in the book I did with Nick Smith, we talk about it having a qualitative aspect, because we're not there to manage the quality. We're there to work with the supervisee to help them reflect on where and where not they're doing their best work, in service of making sure that the stakeholders are getting the best quality practice. And again, normative sort of implies that somehow you eventually become normed and formed. And we see these as ongoing process. So the second one, equivalent to the educative or formative, is developmental. That all of us, I would believe, need to be constantly learning, adapting our practice, growing our capacity to work with a greater breadth of clients and a greater depth of clients. Because the needs in organizations, the needs of the world out there are getting more complex, more ambiguous, and bigger. And finally, and I've just written a new chapter for the book that Lily's also contributing to, it's going to be coming out next year, called The Heart of Supervision. And I've written a new chapter on resourcing is often the neglected third leg. Because resourcing is looking at how do we grow not just our capacity, but that which resources ourselves. And how do we increase our ability to work from source rather than from effort? To work from heart rather than just technique. And I start that chapter with a little story of a supervision where somebody turned up and said, "Peter, I'm so glad we've got supervision today." I said, "That's great." I said, "Why is that?" They said, I'm exhausted. You know, I feel drained and burnt out. But I know every time I come to supervision, I leave feeling recharged and refueled. And I said, "Oh dear. 3 years ago, I would have been very pleased with that feedback and that flattery. But this time I said, oh dear." They said, "Why are you saying oh dear?" I said, "Well, look, it sounds like supervision has become a fueling station. That you're doing your work in a way that drains you, and then you come to be refueled by non-renewable energy from the fueling station." And I think we need to look at how do we make this supervision together a place where you're developing your solar panel at the heart level, so that the work is refueling you in a renewable way, not we are, you know, we've got this balance where you give and give and give in your work, and then you come and get refueled and then go back to giving and giving and giving. Does that story make sense? So I think resourcing is an important thing that we need to hold alongside the attending to the quality of the work of the clients and developing new learning for them and the stakeholders. So I'll make these, via Damien and Lily, I'll make these slides available to you. But you'll see that linked to each of the qualitative, developmental and resourcing are some of the key functions that I see supervision covering. The most important, the only one I'm going to talk about, is the third. Because I would say that, you know, those moments of truth when you're working with a client, and you know that what you do next is really critical. The only thing that's really made a difference in those moments is, having received years of supervision, I've now got a really good internal supervisor that's present in those critical moments. So to give you a quick story, I was working several years ago with a top leadership team in a large stock exchange listed company, one of the largest in Europe. And I noticed that the chief executive was, as I explored with them about how they became a learning team, was getting redder and redder and more tense, and suddenly exploded, and he banged the table and said, "How many FTSE 100 companies," that's like the Fortune 500, "how many FTSE 100 companies have you run?" And, you know, it's one of those moments where you think, where can I disappear? Where's the hole I can disappear into? But that wasn't the worst part of it, that he kind of suddenly exploded at me. The worst part was, I've been challenging all the other members of the team on how come they didn't stand up to their CEO, and how come they allowed themselves to be bullied by him. And at this moment, as he shouted at me, they all put down their pens, folded their arms, and turned and looked at me, saying, "You're right," you know, unconsciously saying to me, "So let's see how you handle him." The only thing that helped me in that moment was the years of supervision, because immediately my internal supervisor clicked in, and my internal supervisor said, "Peter, what are you feeling right now?" I said to my internal supervisor, "I'm feeling on the spot, exposed. Part of me is wanting to get out of the room as fast as I can. The other part has my jacket off, my sleeves rolled up, and I'm ready to fight." So my supervisor said, "So you're feeling vulnerable, attacked, wanting to fight, and wanting to hide?" I said, yeah. So my supervisor then said to me, "So what do you think he's feeling?" Well, actually, this is a CEO. Their company had just been owned by all the banks. It had just gone through an IPO to be launched on the stock market. And he'd been in every national and international paper. He felt absolutely on the line, exposed. He was an introvert. He felt very, very criticized. And I had inadvertently become the latest person he felt criticized by. So he felt very exposed, very vulnerable, wanting to hide and wanting to fight. And so in that moment, I suddenly had empathy with him. And I think we need to have that supervision practice of going to supervision, not just when we've got a problem, but to regularly build up our moments of capacity to be held in those moments. Because without which, I don't think we can hold those moments of truth. That makes sense. So just to quickly say, some of you may know that in the books I write about the stages of supervision. And today I talked a bit about how do we contract, not around what do you want, but what is it your world needs us to work on together, and end by looking at what value we've created for the stakeholders. But in between, we've got to do listening, we've got to do exploring. And I think one of the things that we've discovered is just, we did some research at one stage around clients and coaching. And one of the things we discovered was that insight and a good action plan are not enough. because we discovered by looking at lots of people who came to supervision that the most frequent thing that they complained about, supervisees, coaches, was having clients who would have a fantastic coaching session, an aha moment, would then go away with an action plan of what they were going to do different around a critical relationship, and then would come back a month later and would not have done it. And that this was a pattern that was very strong in supervision that people often brought. And what we also noticed at that point, the coach normally blames the client for the fact they haven't followed through. They were not committed. They lacked courage, right? Rather than look at what do we need to change about the coaching practice to diminish that from happening. And when we started to explore that, we discovered that insight and good intention are not enough to create change. And so that's where we said, both in coaching and in supervision, it's really important we don't stop at insight and action plan. We go from good intention here to embodied learning, and we go into a fast forward rehearsal. So, okay, you're going to challenge this client next time you meet with them. So show me the opening line of how you're going to introduce that challenge. Yeah, show me how you're going to say it. Because as soon as we go into a fast forward rehearsal, the learning moves from a good neocortex intention to an embodied piece of learning. We came up with this phrase, if the change doesn't happen in the room, it ain't going to happen outside the room. So we always need to focus in supervision on what's the shift in me as supervisor to shift the relationship in supervision to help the coach shift their relationship with the client, for the client to shift their relationship with the world. The transformational shift starts in the room. The understanding and the need starts from the stakeholder back. Does that make sense? Yeah, I see some nods. That's great. So what I'm also most well known for is this seven-eyed model. And for those of you who come to the workshop next April in Canada, we're going to, I'll start with a bit of the history and then come back to the model. I first wrote this in 1985, so it's been around for a long time. And the thing that I like is that every time I teach it, I learn something new from the model. So there's something about the systemic nature of this model that I can be still learning from it. I can't even do the mathematics, many years after I wrote it. And, and it's evolved and it's changed over the years, but basically it's still the same. And I wrote it originally not for supervisors. I wrote it for supervisees on the grounds that I realized there was no framework and they got the supervision that their supervisor was comfortable with, not the supervision they needed. Yep. And what we've discovered over the years is that most people who we've trained, they arrive already being good at one or two of the 7 I's, but have 2 or 3 others that they struggle with, and 1 or 2 that they don't go anywhere near. And so what I wanted to do in 1985 was to provide a language where we could together, the supervisee and supervisor, comment on what are the ways we need to work together, and to create a systemic frame which help people think about what is it we need to change in the supervision room to shift what happens in the coaching room, to shift what happens outside the coaching room. And we had some notion of how to work with, if you like, myself as supervisor as a resonant system that can pick up what's going on in the field. That our relationship between supervisor and supervisee can also pick up what's happening in the coaching relationship. And we could attend to the client, but also what's going on in the wider system. As you see down there, I put it, it's still evolving. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, basically we're looking at how does what's going on between supervisor and coach reflect what's going on between the client and the coach, and how is that reflecting what's going on in the client's world. And we're looking at giving ourselves different places where we can pick up what's happening in the systemic resonance. We can listen to the field, not just to the coach or the client. So we're not looking just at 7 different spaces, we're looking at systems reflecting other systems. And what's the pattern that connects across the eyes? How do they connect between them? And if you do manage to come up, I hope many of you will, to that one-day workshop. We're going to be playing with this and doing a deep dive. And I'll be sharing with you some of the areas whereby we'll be trying to move this forward to where the 7-eyed model has been going more recently, and some of the cutting edge. And that's partly because, to set it in context, I believe that in the last 30 years that I've been involved with coaching, we've achieved a great deal. But I still feel we've got to step up as a whole profession. I think all the research suggests that we've done a great job at having very satisfied coaching clients, but that we've done less well in the executive coaching field on how that translates into organizational learning and how that translates into transformation for the stakeholders of the client. And also some of what I've been talking about today, the shift, how we create the transformational shift in the room rather than just good intention. How do we embrace the paradigm shift that my client isn't just the person opposite me, they're my partner, the client is their stakeholders. And how do we therefore have supervision that attends not only just to the needs of the client, but the needs of the client's employees, colleagues, family members, customers, and the wider systems. Indeed, one of the things that I've been helping a lot of coaching organizations do is I say, look, we have to realize that if you're coaching more than 2 or 3 people in the same organization, you're also coaching that organization's culture that's turning up in and between those coaching sessions. So how do we find ways of playing back to the organization, not the confidential material, but what we're learning about the organizational culture? And how do we help that evolve? So I'll send you this, which outlines how I see the paradigm shift. I'll send you this, which talks about how do we move into transformational coaching supervision. How do we get supervision not just to work on the problems, but to work on the emotions that have been stirred up, and also the mindsets and assumptions that are holding the coach back. Because the deeper level of change is always lower down that system. And then this is what we're going to be working on a little, is new ways of doing each of those 7 eyes in a way that has greater impact, is more transformational, and delivers greater value not just to the supervisee, but that whole list of the people that supervision serves. So I'm going to pause there because that's a lot to cover in just one webinar. So what would be great is to take any comments, any questions. And if you want to know more, you can always email me. And if you send me an email, I'll send you a list of where the workshops are that I'm doing in various parts of the Americas next year. So let's go back. Questions, comments, responses.
So do you want to take out the presentation so we can get to see people, Peter?
So, right. So if I close down my screen share.
Yeah. I think that one of the issues that came up today, Peter, that I was very curious because I have heard that for many people over the last few years, is the word supervision and finding other options. And being in the board of directors of ICF Global, we had that conversation. And we went into circles. We also didn't like the word supervision. And we were trying to find out the different word. And we spent, as a board, a lot of time trying to figure out the different word. And we didn't come up to an agreement. So at one point, we decided to just accept that word. Now, some people who have been trained lately, they are bringing this. And I know Terry brought in the chat room something that he's proposing. Originally, he proposed the word peer coach advisor. And personally, I don't like the word advisor because I don't think as supervisors we're really advisors, but like peer coach reflection partners that he came up. That sounds interesting. I wonder about your reaction and other people's reaction to that word.
Yeah, you see, I think part of it is that people are unhappy with both as supervisors in owning the authority and responsibility that you have, or allowing somebody else to have some authority in relationship to us. Yeah, but I think in some ways that's ducking the fact that there is a responsibility that I have as supervisor, not just to help you reflect on what you want to reflect on. I think I do have a responsibility to your stakeholders, which is also to challenge you about what you're not seeing and what you're not hearing. I don't think we should totally try and sweep under the carpet the ethical and policy responsibility I have.
I think that, Monica, please, if you can turn down your mute, you can mute your microphone, please. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. So, Peter, we missed what the last thing that you said because of the background noise.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I don't think we should duck the responsibility and authority elements,
okay,
right? Because I think the danger with doing that is we will end up with something which is peer reflection. And I've written stuff about peer supervision groups and some of the strengths of them and some of the dangers. And there's a whole area in which we can get collusive, because naturally I'm going to have more empathy with the people in the room than the stakeholders outside the room. And partly I think we have to own and step up to the ethical and stakeholder responsibilities that the supervisor provides.
So given that, Peter, do you buy into more the idea of having a, using the word advisor?
Well, what I like the word advisor is it's then the person comes looking for advice and brings questions rather than brings the needs of their stakeholder world for us to collectively explore. If I use the word advisor, my sense is that people then come asking for expertise rather than what I would like to give, which is ruthless compassion. Yep. And by ruthless compassion, I mean absolutely holding that supervisee to the best of their work and to what their stakeholder world is asking them to step up to. Now, that's not an advice capacity. I often say we've got this challenging coaching because research tells us that clients want us to be more challenging. But we can't be challenging from knowing better or knowing first. We have to challenge by having the skills of attending to the system and getting them to hear the challenge that's already out there in the world, that they're sensing, but they're not listening to, not seeing, and not attending to. So I think that's where we have to have ruthless compassion and not be an expert giving advice.
What about accountability partner?
Yeah, I quite like that. I quite like, that's closer for me. But I think we need just to say a little more, or at least be clear about then who we then need to, in our contracting, be clear who we're both accountable to.
Yeah, you could include the stakeholders of the larger system. I guess I've been the one who's, been having marketed this thing for a while now, seeing the extreme prejudice that some people in America have against the word supervisor, especially independent coaches, because they don't want anybody to control them. The word supervisor has, connotations of hiring, firing, certainly not only advice giving, but actually giving people orders. So the word is way, way stronger than advisor, right? It brings up connotations of control, management control. So it's a pretty severe word, and I'm shocked that people stuck with it, actually.
I think there's also, if I could be provocative, I think in America, even more than, I don't think it's the same in Canada or South America. I think we hit some of the culture that's also there around the gun laws, which is a fierce cultural independence. Yeah?
That's right. Yeah, people want to be independent. If you become an independent coach, I've heard people say this with probably stronger language. The last thing I want is a effing supervisor now that I've left corporate America.
Well, that I think has a whole shadow side to it, because I think we have a lot of coaches who are what I call organizational refugees.
Right.
They've fallen out of love with organizations, but they still love individuals. I think rampant individualism is a real problem in the coaching profession.
Yes, I agree.
I would agree.
And I think that part of why I want to hold out for the term, and I want to hold out for why supervision is so essential, is I think rampant individualism and then dyadic collusion is something that is a real shadow to the whole profession.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So do push back.
Yeah, this is Marilyn, and also supervision in the U.S., like from the field that I came from, implies legal responsibility. You have legal responsibility for the person's actions that you're supervising, and we're in such a litigious society, so that is scary to people.
Yeah, but I think one of the things we try and cover on our courses is, I think we've got to avoid the legalization, but we do need to look at what ethical responsibilities supervisors have. And I think that starts from being clear about who the stakeholders are of the process that we have a responsibility to. And then I think it does include how we use supervision to grow the ethical capacity for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things we know from ethics research is that actually talking about an issue before you decide about it increases people's ethical choices.
Mm.
One of the things that worries me was some research that was done by a doctoral student, where she asked people how they attended to ethics in supervision. And something like 3/4 of the people who responded equated ethics as equaling unethical behavior. Some actually said, well, I've never, when asked about an ethical dilemma they've had, they said, well, I've never had any ethical issues come up in supervision. And this worries me, because every coaching session I have has an ethical issue in it. And I think, you know, we do have ethical responsibility as a supervisor.
So
we've got to avoid that becoming brought into the legal machinations in lawyers making money out of it.
Peter, I had a question, if we still have time, or more of a query.
Great, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks. You talk about shift and supervision.
Yeah.
And wanting shift. And I would just like to hear, because many of my clients, supervisees or executives, are actually tired of the shift. They are, you know, they've got huge shift fatigue, organizationally as well as personally. You know, that demand to change, that requirement to shift perspectives, change, and many of them are wanting to sort of land, or at least have a sense of reassurance that you know, they're okay, or you know, it's not always going to be demanded of them, and there's a place to land here. How can supervision, if it can, from your perspective, feed also that in our clients?
I have a one-liner that says, reassurance never reassures.
Well, maybe that's the wrong word, but it's more that a place to, yeah, I usually point to their inner center, or their inner resourcefulness.
Yeah, so I think we do have to help people increase their ability, as I was trying to indicate earlier, to work from source, and to have a spiritual with a small s place where they can work from renewable energy rather than effort energy. So where I agree with you, I don't want people to create a shift as another thing we have to strive for.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. Yeah.
But what I do want is, what I know is also exhausting, is coming up with good intentions and action plans, right, which we never follow through on, and then feel bad about.
Yeah.
What I am interested in is ensuring that in coaching and supervision, we are working with embodied learning, not effort learning, which comes an action list.
Right.
Because actually, if we get to that point, and one of the ways we train people to notice when the shift happens is that actually there's a whole shift in breathing, in language, in the way I'm connecting. And actually, I move much more into a flow of energy.
Right.
Yeah. So actually, the shift should be energizing, not an effort.
Thank you.
If that's helpful.
Yeah, it is.
We need to wrap up because people are starting to leave, and we want to be sure that we have some announcement before everybody goes. First, Peter, I want to thank you for being with us today. I think it was a great session. I see a lot of the people's comments in the chat room. Everybody very appreciative of you being here with us today. It was really great. And also, we want to invite people to join Peter. He's going to be, as he shared with us, doing different sessions in different parts of the United States next year. He's also joining us for the conference in Victoria. Lily, do you want to share with people the details?
Yeah, I posted the link on the chat room. So it's April 19th and 20th. April 19th, Peter will be spending the whole day with us doing the deep dive of the seven-eyed model. And then the 20th, we have various speakers talking all the way from artificial intelligence in supervision and coaching through to ethics, resourcing. Peter's going to do a resourcing piece, diversity and supervision. So some really great sessions lined up on that as well. Hope to see you here. And thank you, Peter.
Yeah, Lillian, do you want to share with people our next session next month with the presenter and the details of that?
Yes, the next one I think was sent out in the same email. It's October 30th, and it's David Clutterbuck at 8 a.m. Pacific time. If you need that, slip me an email and I'll forward the link to you.
And good luck and good wishes for all that you're doing to pioneer coaching supervision in many parts of the Americas.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
As you can tell, Peter, there's a momentum happening here. We had 36 people at the height of this call. That's amazing. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Speak again soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Lynn, I think you're staying on, right? Nice to see you guys. Okay, I just removed them. You're on mute, I think. Oops, I think I'm recording still.